So yes, thank you for that introduction. My name is Liam Alexander, and I make photographic-based collage art. So you might be wondering, what does that look like? So this is what it looks like. So what I do is I take pictures and then I I print them out and then deconstruct and then reconstruct the image using collaged and painted elements. I do a couple different types of work. I do smaller works that are just based on that are really like ink drawings, and then larger collage pieces. And I'm going to get a little bit more into my process a little bit later. But just a little bit of background on me. I've exhibited all over the United States and in New York and internationally. Most recently, I had an exhibit at the NYU Kimmel Galleries, which I was so proud to do. In the Kimmel windows, it was portraits of 11 people that were making a difference in social justice right now. And then last year, I have an arts organization. It's called I Thou Art. And what we do is we use art to support social movements. And we put together this exhibit at, this is another shot of the NYU exhibit. Put together an exhibit with Rush Arts Galleries that was really cool. We did a year-long project, myself and 12 other artists, where we wanted to transform the conversation we were having around gentrification. So we caused community-based conversations where we brought people that were not speaking about gentrification together around the topic, like new residents, old residents, business people, everybody involved. We brought them together to have conversations for what would it look like if we caused community around gentrification. Then each one of the artists created brand new work based on those conversations that we had. So this is what we did at Rush Arts last year, and in December was the opening. It was very cool. And there's my piece that I did in the back there. That's actually a piece of it's two pieces, and it's myself and my grandfather looking at each other. And you can't see it in the picture, but underneath my grandfather it says, born Brooklyn, 1926, and underneath me it says gentrified Brooklyn, 2006. Because I actually, during the exploration of that, it became a very personal journey for me because my family's from Brooklyn. But at the same time, my mom moved out to Long Island. I was raised on Long Island, and then I gentrified Brooklyn because I look like, I'm young, I'm an artist, I look like a white person. So I was gentrifying the same place that my grandfather was born, which I thought was really interesting, and that was what that piece was about. So that's a lot about the work, or a little bit about the work that I do, and I'm going to tell you all a little bit more about the work that I do in a minute. But what this talk is about today it's about redefining what's possible in your medium. So what do I mean by that? So what I mean is that as artists, every time we sit down at our computer, or every time we pick up our camera, or every time we sit down at our canvas, or however we're working, we always have an opportunity to create something new and create something exciting and create something that we've never seen before in our lives. But oftentimes we don't do that. We kind of get stuck in the same patterns of creating the same work over and over again, and sometimes it can become unfulfilling. And we don't really ask ourselves like why it is that we do that. So we're going to explore that a little bit today. And I invite you today during this talk to listen to this talk in a very particular way. Like I'm going to be up here and I'm going to be showing you my work, and I'm standing over here doing a lot of talking. And but I want you to listen for your journey as an artist. I'm assuming all of you guys are photographers or artists, or how many people here are photographers? Woo! That's what I thought. Yeah, so I want you to listen for your journey and where you're at in your journey, and how the stuff that I'm talking about could apply to you. So this is what we're going to talk about. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. I'm going to tell you, how I ended up making the type of work that I'm making. Then we're going to talk about two things: what works and discovery. And then we're going to go over some things to consider, or some rules and some ways that you can add some new elements of creativity to the work that you're doing. And then we'll take some question and answers. And please remind me when we're doing the question and answers to repeat the question if I forget. So first, we're going to dive right into my story. So this is a very brief history of Liam. That's me. So I started my career off as a painter. This is the first painting I ever did. I did it when I was 2. Yeah, I immediately became a huge art star, and obviously lit the entire art world on fire. You can tell there by my sunglasses. No, I'm totally kidding. This is really one of my most expressive pieces, and I've been trying to get back there ever since. So this is what I made when I was 2. I got a little bit older, and I was like, a teenager. I started making drawings of animals. I loved animals, just drawings of animals in fields and in Africa and all kinds of stuff like that. And then when I got to be about 17, 18, I got really into heavy metal, and I got real morbid, and I started doing work like this. I was still obsessed with animals, but now it was just dead animals. So after that, I go to college, and my freshman roommate is a photographer. So I start to get really interested in photography, and when I graduate, I figure it's probably easier to make money doing photography than it is painting. So I start doing photography, and I get obsessed with another kind of animal: girls. And as a college-age kid, I thought, what's the best job I could possibly have? Well, I could be a fashion photographer. So I started shooting fashion. So I shot girls on a backdrop and girls in the grass. And girls in the summertime. And this is what I did for basically my career when I was leaving college. Sometimes I shot boys, but they had to be like really, really pretty. So this is so I did that for a while, and then something really interesting happened. I was making my work, I was shooting fashion photography, and I was getting some notoriety and had my stuff published here and there. And but for some reason, I was getting kind of sick and tired of it. In fact, I was getting really annoyed. I had to spend a lot of time in the computer, and it seemed like I was always in the computer, like doing this and that and that. And I said, you know what? Maybe I should just go back to painting. And then I thought to myself, and this is when I had an epiphany. I thought to myself, why do I want to go back to painting? I hate painting. And I realized when I left college, I didn't stop painting because I wanted to, I thought I could make more money doing photography. I actually hated what I was doing. And now all of a sudden, here I am about 7 years later, and I'm doing the same exact thing. So then I started to think to myself, what's going on here? And I realized there was some kind of a pattern. And I took a look at it, and what I saw was that it wasn't about photography, and it wasn't about the medium, it wasn't about photography, and it wasn't about painting. What it was about how I was using the medium. You see, when I was painting, I was trying to make these hyper-realistic paintings all the time, super, super realistic. And I sucked at it. Well, I didn't suck at it, but this was pretty good, but I couldn't do exactly what I wanted to do, and I got really frustrated and I just gave up. And the same thing was happening in photography. I was trying to make pictures like other people. I was trying to be somebody else, and I was really frustrated because I couldn't do it. And that's when it hit me. And I realized it wasn't about the medium I was working in or the work I was doing. It was about how I was using that medium. And then I realized when I was the one that chose how to use the medium, it opened up a whole new world of creativity for me. And I started doing this. This is me back in 2009. I had I had a little bit less of a haircut, so I started creating. So I started printing my pictures out and making them really big, and then I started painting on top of them. And I thought it was really cool because I was like, oh wow, I don't actually have to do the super realistic work in the painting. I can just take a picture of the super realistic work, and then I can paint around it. So I started doing that, and these are some of the first couple of works that I did. I was just taking fashion pictures that I shot and blowing them up, printing them out, and I had a very specific process in which I printed out the work and pasted it together, and then I went through a series of discovering all kinds of different matte mediums and things like that that I could use to stick the pieces of paper together. Now, at this time, I was really poor, so I just wanted to print my pictures really big, but all I had was like a little Epson document printer. So what I would do is I would print out all of the pieces of the picture in little squares, and then I would paste them all together and then paint on top of them, which was my genius idea. But then I didn't like all these lines that were in them. So I was like, oh, well, I can just cut up the paper and then move it around a little bit. So I started doing that. I started moving the paper around and covering up the lines to try to hide the lines. And it sort of developed into this like really cool style that I started working in. And then I realized, wow, I can, do collage, I can paint. And then I thought, well, what else can I do? So I started messing around with film. And And I did this series of work, which was what I call the landscape of a dream. And what I did was I took a film camera and I brought it with me on my travels. And I would shoot an entire roll of film in one country. And then I would take that roll of film and then I would go to another country and I would shoot that entire, on top of that roll of film in that other country. And then I would have these overlays. And the idea is that I read somewhere that, I don't know if any of you have ever heard this, but your brain actually doesn't know the difference between dreams and memories because they're made by the same part of your brain. And that was sort of the concept of this. It's like, your memories and your dreams are like, everything that happened during the day. You're like, oh, like thinking about a dog you saw or whatever. So this was sort of like a landscape of a dream, was like how these were my memories. I was there, but then they come together to make this sort of like dreamscape. So I did these pictures for a while. You can see here's a couple more of them. Something that was interesting about these is, nobody shoots film anymore. So the only places that would develop the film, they wanted to cut the rolls of film. And I was like, no, don't cut the rolls of film. And they thought I was crazy because I wanted these big, long rolls of film. And what I did is I got a loop and I went in and I found, like on these big, long rolls of film, like the interesting portions of it. So I just kept creating. And I kept exploring. So after this, I started exploring. I started video. I had this idea to do video projects. So I started making video projects. So I made a video. Then I went into sculpture, and I created this sculpture, which was kind of amazing. This was a sculpture, and this was before. We have all these devices now that you can like interact with over the internet, and this is before we did that. So I created this sculpture that was actually activated by Twitter. So it would move up and down when you tweeted at it, and it was before stuff did that. So it was pretty cool. And the idea was it was shown in one place here in New York, and then it was shown in another place in Italy. And the two sculptures could actually talk to each other from Italy to New York. And it would move, and people would be interacting. It was during one of the art fair weeks a couple of years ago. So that was really cool. And then this is kind of the work that I ended up settling on, that I produced the most. But what happened was as soon as I shifted how I thought that I had to behave inside of my medium, it started getting more excited, and I started having more fun. And that excitement translated into exhibits, and that excitement translated into more interest and articles and things like that, and showing my work all around. And so at this point, I started to think about what was really at play here. Like, what was going on? This is like kind of a phenomenon. And I wanted to because I went from being like totally not really happy with the work that I was creating, and kind of it had basically just turned into a job, showing up at work and just making art. I had turned that into creating a work that was inspiring and that I was enlivened by, and that got a lot of interest from the world. So I started to take a look at like what was at play, like what actually happened here, and to do that. And I discovered something that I'm going to call what works. Now, what works is a system or process that we repeat over and over again that produces a desired result. Now, somewhere along the line in our creative process, we discover this. And it basically, that you've discovered what works because things start to feel good, people start to purchase your work, people start to respond positively, or you have this sense of enjoyment, or like, oh, I did it. Like you have this sense like, I've made it, right? And that's how you know that you've discovered what works. And what happens is, what works, by the way, is it's kind of like where we want to get to when we're an artist. Like you're trying all of these things and you're just doing all this work until you get to this point. So all of you guys in the audience, and myself included, we're all either figured out what works or we're on our way to figuring out what works. Now, what works is amazing. When you discover what works, this is great. And what works is the access to sales and the access to acceptance in society as an artist, because consistency is what the world is interested in. They're interested in knowing that you're the person that can do this, and then they'll buy stuff from you. That's pretty much goes for anything. Now, what we don't realize about what works is that what works, although it's amazing for sales and it's amazing for developing our craft, it actually eventually ends up stifling our creativity. And it ends up stifling what got us there in the first place, which is discovery. You see, what happens is, in the pursuit of what works, we tend to decide, and we do this either consciously or unconsciously. We decide what works, and we decide what doesn't work. And when we're pursuing what works, what doesn't work becomes taboo. And we stop doing the things that don't work. So we make a piece that's all blue, we hate it, we never use the color blue again. We make a whole series of mermaids, we show it in the gallery, you don't sell anything, never doing mermaids again, like that type of thing. And what happens is during that process, we start to come up unconsciously with all these rules for ourselves of what we can and cannot do inside of our art. And we forget that we made all those rules up. Because you could really do anything. So what happens is, in our pursuit of finding what works, we actually end up stifling what gives us joy inside of our creativity, which is the process of discovery. So what I'm going to do now, I think, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk to you guys about a couple things that you can do inside of your work to bring back the process of discovery and to either create more enjoyment inside of your work or redefine what's possible for what you're up to right now. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is disrupt where you're at right now. So, and there's a couple of simple actions that you can take to do this. I also want to just stop for 1 second and just say, wherever you're at right now is perfect. And it's amazing, especially if you're selling a lot of work and doing really well. But no matter where we are in our process as an artist, or in life, or if we're a banker, or if we work on a bus driver, there's always the opportunity to take your work to the next level. And that's what this is all about. So you want to disrupt where you are right now. So somewhere along the line, you kind of ended up where you are. And where you are is great, but we want to disrupt it so that we can discover something new. And some ways that you can do that is, one, you can turn off your echo chamber. And so now, what is your echo chamber? Your echo chamber is like everything that you interact with and everything that you see in your life. So for example, when you wake up in the morning, you always have the same coffee in the same spot, you read the same newspaper, you check the same blog, you check the same Instagrams on your Instagram feed when you go on your phone, you go on Facebook and it's always posts from the same people, right? So something that people say about creativity is creative people are able to take two disparate ideas and put them together, and that's what makes their work exciting. Now, if you're constantly exposed to the same ideas and the same things, eventually the way that you feel about your work is going to get stale. So all you have to do is disrupt that, and it's very easy. Just turn on a different channel on the TV. Go to a different place to get your milk. When you go on your Facebook or you go on your Instagram, start liking things that you don't actually like. and because the internet, oh my gosh, you guys, the internet is the worst place to go for inspiration, because the internet works on the exact opposite from what we're talking about here. Because the internet, like Google and all of these websites, they compile information based on what your previous liking history is. So all it does is continue to show the same things that you've always seen over and over and over again, because that's what you like, and then hopefully you buy shoes. But what we're trying to do as artists is we're trying to constantly push the envelope of our own creativity, whatever that is. So that's why I implore you to discover new websites, or start reading books about things that you're not even interested in, like sharks or neuroscience. Just pick it up and start reading it. And just the simple act of introducing one or two new things is going to it's going to spark your creativity inside of you. Another thing you can do is change up your workspace. I've lived in the same place for about 10 years, and I must have changed my studio around like 70 or 80 times. I'm just constantly changing my studio, because the brain, you get, I'm not a scientist, but there's something where it's related to getting pleasure from novelty. And that doesn't always mean that you need something brand new every time. However, something that you can do is just move your desk to the other side of the room. And your brain is like, whoa, this is new, this is exciting, let me go explore this place now. And it can pique your creativity and add something new. So this is actually how I actually created this, this process that I do now. And I told you I'd tell you a little bit more about my process. And so what I do is I take a picture, and then I print it out in lots of little pieces, just like that, out onto the wall. And then I use this, this matte medium to bond everything together. And then on top of that, I will paint and collage other elements on top of the work. And the way I discovered this was by doing exactly what I was talking about. I was frustrated with my work, and I didn't really know what to do. So I actually took everything all my inspiration boards, everything that I had up, and I threw it all away. And I took my bedroom and I converted it into my studio, and then I moved my studio into my bedroom. And I just said, I'm just going to start from scratch. And I literally removed every kind of outside influence and just started making something weird. And then I came up with the style that I work in today. You can see here's a little bit more of that process. The next thing I want to talk about is give up being perfect. Now, inside of our studio, there's two worlds as an artist, or even as an editorial photographer. There's two worlds. You know, there's the public world, like the gallery or the magazine, and then there's your studio, where you're working. Now, inside of your studio, there's no rules. There's nothing you have to worry about. You don't have to show everything that you make to everyone, and you don't have to like everything that you make. But you do have to show the stuff that's going to sell in the gallery. So, and sometimes we forget that, and we get so focused on producing a final result that we get hung up on it being perfect. Now, I want you guys to consider, or actually what I want you to do is I want you to just completely distinguish the idea that what we do has any point to it. Like, there's no point. We're making art or taking pictures. I mean, we're not curing cancer, although pictures can do something amazing, but it's not as significant as we make it. We all know those times in the studio when we're working on something and it's just not coming out right and it's eternally frustrating. I remember this piece was eternally frustrating. It's so funny that I'm showing this piece in a talk that's being streamed online, because it was like, to me, until one moment, this piece was a total disaster. I was like, this is the most disastrous piece of work I ever made. So I started it out like I normally start. I cut everything out, I put it on the wall, I painted it, I didn't really like it, so I made it purple, and I didn't really like that. So then I covered up the purple, and then I was like, oh man, now it's like way too black. This is gonna be no good. Meanwhile, this was a commission that I was doing for a friend of mine, for my friend's brother, and this is his beautiful daughter, Aiden. And she was, I took an amazing picture, and I just couldn't get this piece to look right. I just kept adding more stuff, and it just wasn't coming out. And then finally, and I just kept moving things around. Finally, it got to a point where I was like, I guess this is pretty cool. This is good enough. And then this was the final product. And I liked it, but there was so much significance around this piece that it was the process of doing it made me totally miserable. And so I delivered it to them, and I mailed it to them, and I was like, put my face in my hands, and I was like, oh, this is such a disaster. And they called me and they said, we love it, it's amazing. And then I said, oh, they must be lying. They couldn't possibly love this piece. Which, by the way, it's a cool piece now that I look back on it. It's just so funny how significant we make our work sometimes. And then the funny part is, about a year later, I run into him and his wife at a party, and they go, oh, we love your piece so much, it's so amazing, we love it. And I said to them, oh, that's nice. And then in my head I was like, oh man, that piece, man. and then he goes, honey, give me your cell phone. I want to show him the picture. And he's looking at his cell phone, and he's like, I can't find the picture, I can't find it. And then she goes, silly, it's the background of both of our phones. And then in that moment, I realized, oh my gosh, they love this piece. They really love this. And I gave so much significance to it while I was making it that I wasn't open to even realizing like how much people enjoyed the work that I created. So really, I implore you, just give up give up making it so significant when you're working, and you're going to create so much more enjoyment inside of what you're doing. And that's something I've taken on for myself. The next thing I want to talk about is creating a game. Now, humans are really interesting. Again, I'm not a scientist. I have a couple of friends that are scientists, and they tell me all kinds of cool stuff, but I don't know if it's true because I don't really look it up. I just trust my friends. But so I know that humans at least are one of the few, if not the only animal that plays games. And what's very interesting is humans, we do this thing called making up games, and we do it all the time. Like, we make up a game like, I'm going to shoot for National Geographic. Like, that's just a game that we made up. There's nothing that, that's not real, right? And we also make up all kinds of other games, like, oh, I'm going to get married and like be a good father. That's a game, right? And we just make that up. Another way to create amazing work is you want to create a game for yourself inside of your art. So what I mean by that is you follow these 3 rules. So every game has 3 parts. It has objectives, it has measurable results, and it has rules. So objectives are like, what's the point of this game? Like, why am I playing it? Like, so for example, to be a National Geographic photographer, the point of the game would be, to make money or be world famous or whatever you want the point of the game to be. Then you have measurable results. And the measurable results, that's how you know you've won your game. If you don't have a measurable result, you'll be playing the same game forever and just feel terrible about yourself. You'll never know you won. And then you have rules. And the rules are the most important part of the game, because the rules give you constraints to work in. Now, when you create constraints for yourself as an artist, that is when you are forced to perform under pressure. And that's where your real creativity comes out. Now, especially as photographers in this day and age where we have Photoshop and anything is possible in the world inside of the computer, creating constraints for yourself inside of your work is one of the most important things you can do. So here's an example. This is a game that I created. I decided to play this game that I was going to post a new piece of art on Instagram every single day for a month. Now, this sounded like a good game to me. I had no idea how difficult that was going to be. So I made it. So I check it out. I had an objective. My objective was that I was going to gain exposure for my work. I had a measurable result. My measurable result was I was going to get 10,000 Instagram followers. Then I had rules. I was going to post one piece of art to Instagram every single day, and it had to be a new piece of art that I make. And those are my rules. And then on your mark, get set, go. Now, let me tell you, creating a new piece of art every day is a lot of work. And I had no idea what I was in for. So with regards to this game, I posted something new every single day, but I totally lost the game. I didn't even get nearly 10,000 Instagram followers. I got 1,500, which is still pretty good. I added hundreds of followers to my Instagram. I gained a lot of exposure, but the last important thing about games is that you want to play a game to win, but you can't be attached to the result. So, I played to win and I lost my game. However, I learned a couple of amazing things along the way. One is I learned how to make art fast. I produced more art during that time than I'd produced for the entirety of the rest of the year in that 1 month. And I also learned how to work on multiple pieces at the same time, which is something that I didn't do before. So because in order to get one done each day, I had to have 2 or 3 on deck. And then that way, and I learned how to overcome getting like writer's block or getting stopped, with my work, because as soon as I'd get stopped on a piece, I had to just start a new piece. And then I started a new piece, and then I have 4 or 5 pieces on deck that I was working on to make sure that I could get it together. And I also learned how to kind of give up, what I was talking about earlier, like giving up perfection, because at the end of the day, something had to be done, or else that was it. So what I gained from creating that game for myself set me up more powerfully as an artist for the rest of my life. So creating a game. The next thing I want to talk to you about is find something bigger than yourself. So what do I mean by that? Not yet. So like I said earlier, most of my work was just pictures of pretty girls for most of my career, which, by the way, was an amazing job to do, to just take pictures of pretty girls. I loved it. It was awesome. And all of that changed when I met this girl. That girl with the fist up. Her name is Daisy. And I met her on this day, which was November 24th, 2014. I remember that day very specifically because that was the day that, if you guys remember, Michael Brown, the officer that had shot Michael Brown and killed him, was acquitted by a grand jury on that day. And that same day, all of these people took to the streets, and it seemed like crazy. Like, where did all these people come from? They just took to the streets and they were protesting, and everybody was upset. And just like a lot of you, and also just like most people, I watched all of that on TV. And actually not from the privacy of my home, but I was at the gym and I was on my treadmill and I was like running on my treadmill and watching it on the TV. And I thought to myself, wow, somebody's finally doing something. And then I went back to running on my treadmill, which was actually very apropos if you think about it. But then something crazy happened, which was that I walked outside. If you take a look at this picture, you can see in the background, this is the New York Sports Club. So I walked outside of the New York Sports Club and stepped out into the protest that I was watching on TV. And so you want to talk about disrupting your echo chamber. This was like totally crazy. This is something that I had never like experienced in my life, and I decided to just join in. So I joined in and I started walking with the protest, and I was like, took some cool pictures. I took cool pictures like that. And I took cool pictures like this. And I took a cool picture like this one. And I really learned a lot. I found out, I actually shared a subway ride home with this girl, Daisy, and I learned a lot about, activism and what these people do and who these people are, and I learned that these protests weren't, they weren't impromptu, they were really well planned, and this was like a whole network of people that was doing this work to support communities that I had no idea about. So I went home after I took this picture, and I made this piece of work. Thank you. Which you can see here. And I made this piece of work, and there was something special about this one. It wasn't the most beautiful piece that I had ever made, but what it had was it had something special. And I shared it. I went to go share it on Instagram, which is a trend in my. And I went to go share it on Instagram, and I was like nervous. I was like, what are people gonna think? I was like tagging like Ayotzinapa. So Ayotzinapa is, there was 43 students that went missing in Ayotzinapa, which is in Mexico, which essentially means they were murdered, and most likely by the Mexican government. And there's protesters and people that protest about it here in the United States, mostly because if people don't hear about things like that, they disappear completely from the news because Mexico is super closed off with that kind of stuff. So, it was really intriguing, and I posted this, and it was like a little bit frightening, and it was a little bit exciting to do something that sends a message, that shares a message with people. And I had sort of an epiphany when I did that, because I realized that I'm an artist, and I never really thought about it before. But people listen to me, and I never thought about that. Like, people are listening to me talking, right? But the question I asked myself was like, well, what am I saying that people are listening to? And I realized, like, wow, I have an opportunity to say something more than like, hey, look at me and look at all these pretty girls. Like, I could actually tell the stories of people that are doing some amazing work. So I took that on as a project. So I started doing portraits of people that were making a difference in social justice right now. And so, for example, this is someone by the name of Simone. She's a part of an organization called Copwatch. Now, Copwatch is a really cool organization because they do, you wouldn't expect this, but they watch cops. And what they do is they actually, in neighborhoods where police brutality is an issue, they'll actually follow around the police with camcorders at night. And they have teams of community people that do that to protect their neighborhood, which is kind of amazing because a lot of times we don't even think about that that's like what people's lives are like. And also it's kind of amazing that these people have the courage to do that. So that's Simone, that's a portrait I did of her. This guy is really cool. His name is Matthew, and Matthew's a gay rights organizer, and he works specifically around the topic of conversion therapy. And conversion therapy is a really interesting thing where they use, like, a psychiatrist will try to turn a gay person straight using psychiatry, which is an interesting idea. The only problem is it's actually never worked. And there's a lot of people that do it all over the country. So, the work that he does is he's out to ban conversion therapy in the next 5 years. And they've done it in, like, I'm not sure how many states now. Last I checked, it was like 5 states. And the coolest part about that is that they're not banning it on any kind of human rights kind of issue. What they did in New Jersey, they actually they banned conversion therapy in New Jersey based on consumer fraud, because there's never been a proven case of conversion therapy working, which I thought was pretty funny. So this next woman who I'm going to share with you, I'm going to share with you a couple more of these people. She is an absolutely amazing woman. So she's one of the people that protests around the Ayotzinapa issue and also Mexican rights. She's an undocumented worker here in the United States, and when she protests, she wears that mask to protect her identity. So that, because what she said was that the Mexican government will kill her family. So she protects her identity that way, and she's an undocumented worker. And what's so amazing is I was so inspired by so many of these stories when I was doing this work, because, like, for example, this woman, she cleans houses all day, and you don't think about this, but she spends all day cleaning houses. She sends all that money to support her family at home, and then at night she organizes and goes out and, like, protests. It's like the amount of will and courage and fortitude that she has. It's like I'm so inspired by her all the time. Oh, this person is amazing. This is another amazing story. So this is Angela's son. She made a movie called Plastic Paradise, which is a movie about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. If you guys have ever heard of that, if you've ever wondered where all of the plastic from history goes, like every piece of plastic ever made, it winds up in the ocean, in this place called the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And she made a documentary about it. So I'm doing this project, right? And this is a great story. I'm working on this project, and at night, just like most people, I like to watch Netflix, right? And sometimes chill. And I'm watching Netflix, and I'm watching this movie called Plastic Paradise, and I was like, this movie is amazing. And it actually inspired me to never purchase plastic bottles in the world ever again when I'm walking around. So that's why I'm drinking Perrier. I don't like Perrier. So I'm watching this movie, and I'm like, this woman is amazing that made this documentary. I was like, well, I'm doing this project, so I'm like, I got to do a portrait of her. So I looked her up on the internet, and I just emailed her. And I said, hey, I'm doing this project. Like, I really am inspired by your film, and I want to do a portrait of you. And then a couple of weeks went by, and I was like, oh, nothing happened. And then I got an email back from her, and she was like, oh, that's so amazing. Like, thank you for thinking of me. Like, I'm so excited about this. Like, I would totally do it, but I live in California. So unfortunately, I can't participate in your project. And I was like, no, I'll go to California and shoot you. So I flew to California. It worked out perfectly because I had to go to a family reunion in San Diego. So I flew to California for the family reunion, rented a car, drove from San Diego to LA, and then shot a portrait of her on the beach, just like that. And then we became friends, and I included her in the show. So it was sort of like an amazing experience of like just being unstoppable, and she's an amazing woman. And that brings us to the next thing, which is you never know what's going to happen when you do something like that. So this is this work that I did ended up in the NYU Kimmel Window Galleries, which was by far the biggest exhibition that I had ever done in my life. And it was such an honor to be in a great place like that. It brings me to my final piece that I'm going to talk about, which is just go for it. throw your hat over the fence just so that you can just go get it. The greatest example of this in the history of time is John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy went on TV and he was like, "We're going to go to the moon in 10 years." And everybody in the office was like, "What? We don't even have a space program. What are you talking about?" But he went on TV and he threw his hat over the fence just so that they could go and get it. And that's really what I invite you guys to do. Now, that's what happened here with my work. This is the exhibit that I did at NYU. And now, I told you, I met this, that one activist, her name is Daisy, and that was the only person that I knew in the activism world. And I had this idea, like I want to do these portraits of people that are making a difference in social justice right now. And so I was talking with Pamela, who's the curator of the Kimmel Galleries, and I told her about it. I just said, "Hey, Pamela, like this is what I want to do. I want to do these portraits of activists." And she was like, "That is an amazing idea. Do it, and we'll show the work." And I was like, "Great." And I hung up the phone, and I was like, "Man, I don't know any activists." And then this is what, and then she texted me. She's like, "We're going to put you in the windows." And I was like, "Oh man, I got to fill all these windows, and I don't know any activists." But I'd done it. I threw my hat over, so I went for it. So I called up Daisy and I said, "Hey," I was like, "I don't know any activists. Introduce me to some activists. Let's do this." And we started just calling people up and asking people if they would participate. We started to get people involved, and then we started creating the work. And then I got, somebody once told me that if you have a lot of problems, create a bigger problem, and then all your little problems will go away. So after I got rid of the problem of finding all of the activists, I had this problem of like, where am I going to make all of this work? Let me tell you something about the Kimmel windows. Each window is 40 by 60.
Oh my God.
And there's 13 windows. So I live in a railroad apartment that half of it is my studio. So this is what my apartment looked like. So I was like totally scrambling. All of my walls were like covered with these pieces of work. It was like a complete mess. I was just like, where do I make all this work? But I just did it. I just pulled it off. I was doing like 7 or 8, and this is again like, when I was talking about like what I'd learned from that game that I created, right? I learned how to make multiple pieces of work at a time, so I was like, no problem. I started just throwing them up on the wall, and whenever I got stuck on a piece, I'd just throw another one up, and then when I got stuck on that one, I'd peel it off and put it in the kitchen, and like throw another one up, and I had them in the kitchen and like everywhere, like hanging all over the place. And then finally, so then finally, like when I finished some more examples. So during the process of creating this event, Pamela was like, "I want to do actually 2 shows. We're going to do your show downstairs, and then I want to do a group show upstairs." And she curated an amazing group show of all different types of artists that all did work on the topic of othering, which is when you take somebody and you say that they're other than me, and it kind of like separates. And basically the concept of othering is what people, attribute to all types of transgressions in human being. That's another talk. But so she said, did this whole exhibition on the topic of othering, and she said, "I want to put some of your pieces upstairs." So I finished all 11 of these portraits. They're all done, got them into the windows, and then she's like, "Okay, cool, what are you putting upstairs?" And I was like, "Oh man." So I did this like whole like wheat paste thing, and you can see here, so I took these pieces, and I was like, I don't have any money. I've like totally bankrupted myself doing this entire project because it was all self-funded and I don't even have a job. So I'm left over. So I went to Staples and I printed these gigantic architectural prints of the pieces that I had done. And then I wheat pasted them onto cardboard. And then I put them up in the show. And it ended up looking like that, which was pretty cool. And then at the end, I was like, I had this other idea. I said, what if we sold posters at the opening? So then this is some images of the show. So then I made posters. And I had no idea how to do that. So I just called up the printer that actually, if you see these things, they're the guys that, Pamela said, oh, the guys that do the decal can make your posters. So I was like, okay, cool. So I called them up. I said, hey, can you guys make posters? And they were like, sure. So they made all of these posters. And at the end of the day, the moral of that story is that I just kept throwing that hat over the fence. And every time I would pick it up, I just throw it right back over the fence. And what ended up happening is at the end of the day, during the exhibit, I didn't sell any of those gigantic pieces that I had spent all that time on, but I ended up selling thousands of dollars of these posters. Who knew, right? And it was like literally 2 days before the show. I was like, maybe we should make posters. And I ended up selling thousands of dollars of posters, and I actually gave 50% of the profits to each of the activists that were featured in the posters, which was really cool. And this is an image of the group show that was upstairs. And we did that project. So then that project, you saw it was called I Thou. After doing that project, it actually led me to start my arts organization, I Thou Art, that uses art to support social movements. So each year, we take on a new project. And the whole idea and the whole concept behind the work that we do at I Thou is to use art to support social movements, but in a very specific way, which is that we bring people together instead of alienating people. So we always want to we're always working with ideas that are going to create a world that works for everybody. And that's what we did in that show that I told you a little bit about in the beginning. So, just to recap, redefining what's possible inside of your medium. Oftentimes, or every time we sit down as an artist and we make new work, we have the opportunity to redefine what's possible in that moment. And if you want to take that opportunity, what you have to do, disrupt where you're at right now, give up being perfect and just explore, create a game that you can play, commit to something bigger than yourself, and finally, just go for it. Okay, great. Well, I want to thank you guys so much for coming out here. It was my absolute pleasure to speak to you this afternoon, and if you weren't here, it wouldn't have been possible for me to speak. So really, no, really, I acknowledge you so much for coming out. Thank you.